This week on the Fair Dinkum department, should Magic Round move each year? Is there a refereeing bias against the Warriors? That's going to be fun to talk about. Should the Roosters give up on the MANU experiments? This is definitely submitted by you, Liam. Is Ben Hunt finished as Dragons halfback? And to finish it off a little bit spicy, is LATRELL Mitchell a protected species? Outrage, there's a fair bit of it this week. We're going to decide if it's real or ridiculous. I'm Chris Danks. We're here with Liam O'Loughlin. We are the Fair Dinkum department. Got a pretty easy thing we're going through today. Talking through everything that happened at Magic Round. Is there a little bit of outrage? Is it real? Is it ridiculous? Start with the big stuff. Game of the round for you. I know obviously both our teams lost on the weekend, so a little bit tough.
They sure did. I'm a bit more used to it than you are, I think, at this stage though. Game of the round for me, main event, if you want to call it that, Sunday night, Titans-Eels, high scoring game.
Okay.
It was 5 tries apiece. Kieran Foran winding back the clock with a couple of tries. That was a really good game of footy. Two exciting attacking sides. But what about yourself?
Randomly, Dolphins Sharks. I know.
It was a bit like me last week with Dragons and Dogs.
I actually loved it. I was at the pub watching it, and it just felt like I was watching. At first, I was just watching a car crash in slow motion, or at least the Sharks were in slow motion. Dolphins weren't. But watching the Dolphins when they are, because they're such a confidence team, when they're putting it together, Cody Nikorima was like incredible. Val Meninga, your man, just busting through defence. I loved it. I thought it was a great game. And if you're a Sharks fan like me, pretty easy to walk away from. Like, it was so bad. What's one of the worst games I've seen them play in half a decade? But it was so bad that I thought, you know what, like that's one where you can just go, that happens. It's not even really worth trying to fix it, because what can you do with that kind of disaster? Start again next week.
Yeah, draw a line in the sand, I think, for that one.
Love a draw a line in the sand. Very rugby league of you. All right, let's kick it off. Magic Round, remaining in Brisbane. There's been a little bit of chatter that, or maybe over the past few years, that maybe another city should get a go. This year was the 4th. Brisbane have had it. They've got it till the end of 2024. Andrew Abdo's come out and said they'll certainly look at other places. You have to think Perth, Adelaide, New Zealand, definitely. New Zealand he actually specifically mentioned. What are your thoughts on it?
To be honest, it's such a great spectacle up there in Brisbane, and because it is such a rich rugby league city, I'd like it up there, even though I haven't been yet. I would love to, but I think Brisbane is the right place for it at the moment, especially if you look at somewhere like Perth. They don't have an NRL team yet either. They don't have that rusted on fan base that they've got up there in Brisbane, and you talk about Caxton Street and just the whole vibe around the city. It just looks like a real carnival atmosphere. People flying in from all over the eastern seaboard, which is obviously where rugby league is, at its strong point. So I think Brisbane is the right place for it. New Zealand I could see for maybe a one-off, but I think long-term Brisbane's definitely the right place.
I tend to be exactly the same as you. So Katie Jones came out over the weekend and said 40% of people who go to Magic Round are from interstate. So massive cash injection. But if you're then over in Perth, I don't know if you're getting that many people to go. Like, it's an hour flight for us to get up to Brizzy, or hour plus change. Yeah. If it's suddenly like a borderline international flight, I don't know if I would.
Yeah, it's a longer flight. It's also a bigger stadium as well, Optus Stadium. And it's not as good a rugby league stadium, obviously, because it's an oval ground. Yeah. Whereas Suncorp is, probably the best place in the world to watch rugby league. I'm happy with Brisbane. I think obviously the NRL will look at the dollars and cents and see where it's going to work for them from a business perspective. They'll look at all the bids, they'll weigh it up in that regard. But I think if we're talking about Magic Round being, the pinnacle weekend of the regular season in the NRL, I think Brisbane is the right place for it. Obviously Sydney, for now, has the grand final each year. State of Origin moves around a bit, but for Magic Round, I think that's the right place for it.
Yeah, definitely. I have always thought the grand final should move. I'm happy for it to be played somewhere different. I like the Super Bowl concept for that. I know most people don't. But if the NRL, if they're going to go that way, I think maybe Magic Round just stays as in. I don't think you go with a broken concept. So
no.
You don't try to fix something that's not broken.
Yeah, exactly right. I'm not sure about the moving the grand final.
Yeah. They're not going to. It's tied up for like the next years now.
I get why they talk about it. But yeah, I don't think so. I think ANZ, in terms of big games, it's probably the best rugby league stadium in Australia. So I'm happy to keep the grand final there and keep Magic Round in Brisbane and keep everyone happy.
Yeah, right. Oh, and then just have but Origin moving around?
Yeah, I'm happy with the one at Suncorp, one at ANZ or Accor Stadium, and then one somewhere else. This year's obviously in Adelaide. We've seen it in Perth as well, in Melbourne. So yeah, I'm happy to move that third Origin game around so no one's getting an advantage over the other.
Okay, but Magic Round moving cities each year, bit ridiculous?
I think so, yeah. Leave where it is.
Yeah, I'm the same as you. On to the Warriors, the refereeing saga. 2 sin bins in that 18-6 loss to Penrith. Warriors' major sponsor from one, a guy named Jason Paris, had not 1, not 2, but 3 cracks at the refs, the latest on Monday morning. A lot of what he said, so he came out super hot, basically just saying the refs taking money. The Warriors are playing against 14 players. Well, if they've only got 12. Some super spicy stuff that a major sponsor probably shouldn't take. Now, Andrew Abdo's then come out and said, all right, we're going to investigate those comments. Jason Paris has come back and said, great, I'd love to have a data-driven discussion about it. Basically, am I right or am I wrong? Without looking at any of the data, do you reckon the Warriors get a pretty rough go?
Historically speaking, yeah, I think so. No referee goes out onto the field to do that on purpose. They're not intentionally doing that, but I just think it's something that has been around for a long time, that the Warriors, if there ever is a 50-50 call, it's going against them.
Stung.
Yeah, they get stung by 50-50 calls. And then the other thing that they brought up, Jason Paris, was the scheduling. They've played 3 games in the past 11 days, tough games as well. So yeah, I don't think there's a bias, but I think there's just this weird sense of the Warriors missing out on certain things, whether it's on the field or off the field.
What's this calling them the Wars?
The Wars. I don't know. It's a new thing, but I like it. I'm on board. Jackson Thomas, he's gone back over there to work in the media department. He's big on calling them the Wars, and I think it's caught on.
I would say it's ridiculous. But I won't old man scream at the clouds too long about it. But okay, so I think we're both in agreement. There is no refereeing bias against the Warriors, really. No. But I'm sure if I was a Warriors fan, I would say very different, because it certainly feels like the big decisions they get definitely the rough end of the stick.
Yeah, and you only had to look at one of the sin bins in the Warriors and Penrith game where someone was sin binned, and then a similar instance happened a few hours later in the South Melbourne game, which I'm sure we'll get to shortly, but there's just a clear discrepancy there, and South Sydney are a competition heavyweight and won 21 premierships. The Warriors are probably not as well looked after in that department, and yeah, that's where I suppose Warriors fans can feel a little bit of a gripe if there is that inconsistency with certain incidents in games, especially when they're only a few hours apart, and we do have the bunker, which is there to keep it consistent, but that's never going to be a perfect model.
Do you reckon a lot of the fan-led good vibes towards the Warriors have worn off? Like, remember during COVID, right, where Warriors did everything to keep the game alive. They were pretty much everyone's second team. Do you reckon there's still a little bit of that, or nah?
I think there's still a little bit of that until they start beating your own team, and then I think that goes away pretty quickly. But I think the Warriors are probably still everyone's second or third team. Everyone's usually got a soft spot for the Warriors, mainly because they've been pretty ordinary for most of their existence. But they're playing some pretty good footy this year. They've come up short in the last few games in some tough conditions or against some high quality outfits, but they're looking like a top 8 team this year potentially, and if they can start getting some 50-50 calls go their way, they're certainly going to be there or thereabouts, I would say.
That's fair. Sam Walker's status. So he remains out of the side for right now. Didn't play Cup on the weekend as well. He had an illness.
Yeah, he got pulled out Saturday morning, I believe Trent Robinson said, after the game on Sunday. Because it was a bit strange. He got pulled out of Cup, but then he also got omitted from the Roosters team, their 19-man squad. So everyone was a little bit confused there, but that makes a lot more sense.
Roosters weren't great. They scored one try in like the 77th or 78th minute. Seemed a fair bit clunky. I think they were probably a better side. with Walker in them. Do you think maybe this Manu experiment is it? Where do you see Joe Manu's best position being?
Centre. He's the best centre in the world.
Yeah.
Outside of maybe LATRELL, and Trell doesn't really play there outside of Origin and for Australia now. So in terms of out-and-out centres in the competition, Joe Manu is head and shoulders above. And we've seen in recent years that he doesn't play that traditional type of centre role anymore. He is given that bit of a licence to roam. But I just think as a 5'8", he doesn't quite have the ball playing ability. He's a run-first kind of player. And at the moment, that's not working for their attack. Especially when Teddy, who has improved in that department, but he's not a noted ball player either for a lot of his career. They've got two run-first guys in their spine, plus Brandon Smith, who we know is definitely a run-first first guy out of 9. It's putting a lot of weight on Luke Keary's shoulders.
Yep.
And I just think the balance of their team would be a lot better with Sam back at halfback.
That probably plays a little bit into what Robbo was saying, that it's not a personnel issue, it's a system issue, that they do have too much of the same, which I'm sure there'd be many teams that would love to have that problem, but there's something clearly going on at the Roosters.
Yeah, Teddy said in the post-game presser on Sunday afternoon after the loss to the Cowboys that they just, they look frustrated, they feel frustrated. They've got a lot of high-quality individuals in their team, but they're not quite clicking at the moment. And Sam wasn't playing awful, but he wasn't setting the world on fire either, and maybe that little time in reserve grade might light a fire under him when he does eventually get back into the team. But I think if the Roosters are going to be a force this year in the Premiership, which if they want to be, they need to turn things around sooner rather than later, and Teddy admitted that. I think Sam should be back in at halfback, Joey back in the centres, and possibly Joseph Suaalii on the wing, because I don't know if he's a centre at this stage of the game.
Yeah, that's fair. I can buy that.
So,
and he's a hell of a winger.
Yeah, he's a hell of a winger. Yeah, hell of a winger. But yeah, in terms of real or ridiculous, what do you think? Is it time to give up on the Manu 5'8" experiment?
Definitely. And I was pushing for it massively at the start of the year. But as is typically the way, I'm going to have to walk back those comments. I think he's much better as a centre.
I think it's good to have a guy like him in your team, obviously. If Teddy's away on Origin duties or a half does go down, that he can go in and he can do a good job. But at the moment, they just look a little bit clunky with him in the 6 jumper, and I think they'll get a lot more out of their attack with him back in the centres.
On to my favourite part of every single week. We hate on the St George Illawarra Dragons. We're not hating on them this week, but Ben Hunt obviously started half, moved to hooker. Do you want to give us the rundown of exactly what happened?
So it came out midway through last week that Ben had been training a little bit at hooker. Him and Moses Mbai had been sharing the hooking duties at training. Jacob Little obviously got dropped, which a lot of Dragons fans were up in arms about, just for something different. So Jake obviously gone back to reserve grade. Moses started the game at hooker, played 25 minutes. He got subbed off. Jaden Sullivan came on, went to halfback, even though he has played a bit of hooker. He went straight into the halfback role. Ben Hunt, obviously we know how good a 9 he is. He's moved there midway through the first half.
Looked very good.
Yeah, Ben played pretty well. He still looks pretty frustrated,
Yeah.
pretty downtrodden at the moment, just with the way things are going. But Bud Sullivan was unreal. As soon as he came on, he gave them the spark that they haven't had for the last few weeks, the Dragons. He adds pace, which the Dragons lack a lot of all across the park, even in their outside backs. They just don't have a lot of pace. So he adds that to their team, which they desperately need. And Ben out of hooker, his kicking game's really good there. His service is a lot quicker and crisper than Moses Mbai. So I think it works, but Ben Hunt has publicly said he doesn't want to play there. So I don't know where that leaves the Dragons, where that leaves Hook, where that leaves Ben moving forward.
Because Sullivan can only start, yeah?
I've never been a fan of changing your spine mid-game, except if it's a hooker.
Yeah.
That's pretty commonplace, but the Dragons trialled it a few years ago. I think 2019, they had Norman and Hunt in the halves, Gareth Widdop at fullback and Dufty on the bench, and then they were bringing him on midway through a game and changing everything around. You're just going to get no continuity doing that.
Yep.
And Bud's been playing really well since he's gone back to Cup. Junior had a really good year last year in a side that struggled. He's probably been a little bit behind the 8 ball just because of some things that have been going off the field for him. But I think the more football that Tyrell Sloan, Junior Amone, Bud Sullivan, Ben Hunt play together, all in the spine, all playing, 60 to 80 minutes together, the better the Dragons are going to be. But it's going to be up to Ben and up to the coaching staff, I suppose, because he's publicly said he doesn't want to play there.
So, just in your mind, real or ridiculous, Ben Hunt finished as the Dragons halfback?
Personally, I think it should be real because I think that's the best looking Dragon spine is when he's at hooker and Bud's in the halves. But whether that's going to happen on a permanent basis for 80 minutes remains to be seen. I'd say it's more unlikely than likely at this stage. But if they get a new coach in, that could change pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I guess the conundrum is if Ben doesn't really want to play there, he's in his early 30s now. He's probably only got 2, maybe 3 years left in the top grade. Does he want to be playing in the middle and making, 40, 50 tackles every week? I don't know. There'd be a lot of clubs lining up for him to come and play halfback. So could leave them in a tricky situation.
Finally. So we've kind of spoke about this earlier when we're talking about maybe double standards.
Yes.
In terms of refereeing. There was a LATRELL Mitchell incident in the 28-12 win over the Storm. Oh, actually, there was 2. There was the Harry Grant one, which when you coupled with the post-game stuff, like they're good mates.
Yeah.
They had a bit of push and shove. That was nothing major. But there was also the Cam Munster one. Latrell's been accused of grubbing tactics a million times in his career already and will probably be accused of it a million times more. Your man, Paul Crawley, in the telly, claiming refs are scared of Trell and he is protected. That sounds super spicy reading it.
It does.
But I think there's an element of truth in that. But I don't think it's a Latrell thing. I think it's just your gun players are probably given more leeway than someone who's maybe on debut.
Yeah, I think so. I wouldn't go as far to say that Latrell is a protected species or anything like that. But it's not a knowingly thing that the referees do. But if, there's a Latrell Mitchell or in the past a Cameron Smith or a Jonathan Thurston, those two probably not as, I suppose, grubby on the field. But, Cam Smith loved a little bit of niggle and he seemed to get away with a fair bit from the officials. And it's because they have such a high stature in the game. Referees probably aren't doing it on purpose, similar to the Warriors stuff, but it does happen. And it was pretty clear when there was a few hours in between the Warriors incident and Latrell didn't even get penalised for the incident with Harry Grant on Saturday night. It's not a great look, and you can see South supporters don't care because he's their man and it's working for him, but I could see why other supporters would be a little bit frustrated sometimes when Latrell and Cody Walker as well, to a certain extent, seem to get away with just niggly little shit in the ruck and pushing blokes' heads and elbows. And there was one last week where Latrell kind of headbutted Adam Reynolds, and I don't know. That
didn't get much airplay.
No, it's not. It's never really like overly malicious or anything like that, but it's just little stuff that builds up, and it does leave opposition fans probably a little bit frustrated.
I thought it was interesting. It might have been on Channel 9 in the post-match where he was saying he wouldn't tone down his aggression, but he was just like, footy seasons are really long and really hard to get up for. Like, I have to kind of get myself in a specific mindset. I'm like, I don't mind it.
Yeah,
I just think yesterday, so Sunday, was just like super unfortunate timing. And I'd love it if maybe guys who don't have the huge profile of our stars get kind of treated the same as our stars, but that's never going to happen.
No, it's never going to happen. No, and I mean, you look on the flip side, Victor Radley, I would say he's a big star in the game, but he gets treated differently on the other end of the scale, where anything he does marginally wrong, he's sitting down for 10 minutes and throwing water bottles in the sheds out of frustration because he's got no idea what's going on at the moment, poor Victor. But yeah, there's two sides to it. I suppose Jared Warrior-Hargraves has been the same for a lot of his career. He probably gets penalised sometimes when other players wouldn't. So, look, there's always, I suppose, double standards when it comes to officiating, especially with big name players, but protected species tagline is a little bit ridiculous for mine.
Are you officially calling our man real or ridiculous in terms of his claims?
Ridiculous.
Yeah. I love finishing on an easy one.
Yeah.
Just cruising in the one day. Great, that's it, 10 rounds down.
Yeah, I know we're approaching, we're close enough to approaching the halfway mark of the season, obviously coming into Origin now, so it's a very exciting time of the year, and all those selection talks are only going to ramp up. Guys like David Feeder, Reece Walsh are really pressing their claims. Big Corey Horsburgh on Friday night was good for the Raiders as well. And obviously guys like Campbell Graham and Hamole Olakawatu have been pushing for a spot in the New South Wales team, so everything's going to ramp up in the next few weeks.
Do you see, just on Manly then, do you see many of their guys, considering their form, that affecting their Origin chances?
I mean, we spoke about it a couple of weeks ago, but Turbo, I don't know if he's getting picked.
Yeah, outside of Turbo, because we don't know.
Yeah, at the moment, I mean, Jake's out injured now.
Yeah.
DCE's obviously going to be there for Queensland, but outside of that, I didn't think too many of their blokes were going to be pushing for a spot anyway.
Yeah,
So both the Turbos are possibly going to miss out on selection, both due to injury in Jake's case, and Tom, just some fitness concerns and I guess form as well. But yeah, I don't think Manly will be missing too many players due to Origin commitments.
Wild. Origin with no Turbos.
Yeah, it'd be strange, wouldn't it?
Let's see what happens. All right, that's it for us. We'll see you next week.